Hi all, this is Anthony Wilson, your Public Information Officer. A few hours ago we had a City Council meeting, and I think by far the item that was on the agenda that was of the most interest, importance, and impact to our community had to do with San Angelo's curbside recycling program and what seems to be some changes that may be coming down the pike. And so I've invited Joe Spano here. Joe is the Municipal Services Manager for Republic Services, which of course is San Angelo's contracted provider of trash services. So Joe, first of all, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Tell us about the presentation that your boss, Davey Daniel, who is the local GM of Republic Services, made to the City Council today.
Yeah, so the purpose of today's council meeting was to sort of get some guidance from council and the mayor to sort of establish where recycling is today and sort of the struggles that are going on not only nationwide but worldwide, right? Our focus obviously is going to be on San Angelo, right? But the implications of what's going on in the recycle world obviously are grand. And so we wanted to ensure that council knew that this wasn't sort of an isolated issue. The things that we wanted was we wanted some guidance to negotiate with staff some changes. What those changes are, we don't really know, right? We wanted to at least get the conversation started, and that's why we're at council today.
And so you mentioned that what's happening here locally really doesn't have anything to do with the failure or success of local recycling efforts. This is something that is touching the recyclables market on a global scale, but it is having some very large impacts on butts recycling in particular, because they're the processor and the marketer of the recyclables that are collected. So talk a little bit about what's happening on a global scale and how that's coming home to roost, if you will, locally.
Sure. So on a global scale, you have to look at China, right? In 2017, China implemented what the industry is calling the China Sword, and I would highly recommend anybody to look that up on their favorite search engine, because it's very interesting what's going on in the world of recycling. China Sword, and what that is China is putting strict contamination rules and into place. They already had contamination rules, but now they're kind of squeezing them even more. So when you look at something like mixed paper, which is in San Angelo, 20% of what goes into the green bin is mixed paper. The magazine pages and the ads and things like that, the color ads, things like that come in. That's called mixed paper. So China is accepting zero mixed paper, right? They don't even want it anymore. And so that's a big deal. And on top of that, you look at the contamination levels of the plastics and the aluminums and things like that were being shipped over there. Those used to be, in the teens, right? 15%, 13% they would allow. And pick the clean stuff out and obviously landfill the rest of it. And that's down to 0.5%. So you can see that China is really cracking down on contamination. And what that does is it sends ripples through the industry all over the world, particularly in the United States, because we have so far to ship. So it really puts recycle programs curbside in peril.
And so talk about what the impact has been on our local recycler, Butts Recycling.
So, right. So
which is who you contract with. Once Republic picks up the recyclables, you take them to Butts Recycling.
Correct.
You have a contract with
Correct.
those
folks. So, we all say San Angelo is different, right? So San Angelo in this particular case is factually, it's different. Republic Services is basically, we're the delivery guys, right? We pick it up at your home and we bring it over to Butts. Butts Recycling has been a fantastic partner with us since the inception, right, in 2015 when we started, I believe. They've been a great partner. They're still a great partner, right? It's still status quo. We're still picking up materials. What happens is when the largest buyer of United States recyclable materials decides that they are going to completely uproot the program and make changes, right? Such as the contamination, such as not allowing the mixed paper, and thus lowering prices. These recyclers, once they spend the money on sorting it and getting it cleaned up and compressing it, packing it, baling it up and shipping it, Well, they have to sell it, right? They're a business. And unfortunately, the sale of that product is way down. When you look at mixed paper at $97 a ton and now it's worth $5, it probably costs more to produce the ton, right? And so the recyclers are in business just like anybody else is in business. When their costs go up, everybody's costs go up. And so it really creates an interesting time in recycling. And again, they've been a great partner. They're still a great partner, but they are without a doubt feeling the pinch of the China sword.
And so what I'm hearing you say is a recycling operation like Butts, their main customer in the long run used to be China, and now that market's really not open to them any longer. In fact, China, I think I read, had accepted 40% of the recyclable commodities around the world were imported into China.
40%. And now you're looking at probably less than 10, right? So big hit. So Butts would then, when Butts has when they go through their recyclables and they bill, and I don't want to speak too much for Butts, right? They're a private company and I don't work for them, so I don't want to misspeak for them. But they have to sell it off to someone else who I would imagine that person is the one that gets it to China. I would imagine there's a couple of steps because because of the distance traveled, I would imagine that when they go to port and things like that, I'm sure there's a couple of more people involved in it. That I don't know. But it all boils down to they have to be able to get rid of the product, right?
Yeah. And so you mentioned that the Chinese have reduced the allowable contamination rate for paper and for plastics down to 0.5%.
Correct.
So by contrast, what's the current contamination rate in San Angelo?
So San Angelo is, so we have heavier months than usual, right? Around the holidays, it kind of gets a little heavier, but typically on average, we run in the 30% range.
And so is there any way any American city could reasonably achieve that level of contamination, 0.5%?
I would think probably not, and I'm imagining that is the whole point of it, right? I think that there's, when you look at it as almost a penalty, right? I think that there are higher powers that are working here. I don't know. There's probably a lot of politics involved in it on a national level. I don't know that, but that is a very large percentage, right? I mean, you're going from 13 to 15 down to 0.5. I mean, that's big.
And so I just want people to know that this really isn't a matter of whether or not San Angelo's curbside recycling program has succeeded or failed. Again, these are global market forces that are at play.
Absolutely. And you have to look at where we are, right? If without Butts recycling in the mix, right? That means for the curbside recycling program to stay the way it is, we would have to take the materials to San Antonio 2 times a day. So you're talking 185 mile one-way trip. You're talking doing that 2 times a day unless you put a couple of packers on a trailer and take them down. But typically you'd be going there minimum once a day. So environmentally, it doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, right, to do that, but and it's certainly not cost effective. You could imagine what it would cost to run a truck to San Antonio and back every single day.
So how much waste has our recycling program been able to divert from the landfill?
Quick math. If you figure 330 tons is about what we're picking up a month, with call it a 30%, right? So you're looking at, I would say, a couple of 180 to 200 tons are being diverted, I would say.
And that's on a monthly basis that are not going into our landfill.
That are not going into the landfill.
And so obviously that extends the life of the landfill. Talk a little bit about why that's a worthy goal, maybe both from an environmental and also a financial standpoint.
Sure. Well, obviously the environmental, right? Some of these items that are going in there, especially the plastics, right? If you look at plastic bottles and Tide bottles and whatever it is, those types of items, tin cans, could you imagine how long those take to decompose, right? If ever. I mean, they take years. Some products can take up to 100 years to decompose, and that's even if they reach 100% decomposition. So you obviously want to get as much out as possible. But really, the biggest part is landfills are getting very, very expensive. And they're very, very expensive to operate, and they're extremely expensive to expand. Even if you already own the land, the permitting in and of itself is an expensive process, right? And it's one that you want to put off as long as possible, right? Especially us. Republic owns many, many landfills, hundreds of landfills across the country. And so we obviously love to minimize what goes in them at all costs. When you think about it from a large scale, if you look at our landfill, let's say we take in let's just call it 175, I think it's 178, but 175,000 tons, right, annually. And then you look at what's being brought in recyclables. Let's say the program was to end tomorrow, right? You would really only push back just because we're the only city in West Texas that's doing the recycling. So you don't have that volume from, let's say, 20 cities, right? We have the volume just from San Angelo, just from us. And so it would probably take 4 to 6 months life off the landfill if we started putting it back in. But 4 to 6 months is 4 to 6 months, right? We're not making it sound like it's not a lot. But in the grand scheme of tonnage, it's not a whole lot of tonnage, right?
But I don't know that people necessarily understand that expanding or building a landfill, they just think of it as a dump,
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's a pretty sophisticated operation that costs
Absolutely.
multi-millions of dollars in order to develop.
To develop and to maintain. I mean, they're almost just as expensive to maintain as they are to develop. There are so many rules and regulations when it comes to burying trash that if the average person knew, I mean, it is quite an operation to bury trash.
And again, you said you don't want to speak for butts, and I'm not going to ask you to, but do you know, with the market having shrunk the way that it has, what's happening with our recyclables since this change in policy in China this past March?
So our program is still status quo, right? So as we speak, we're still picking up recyclables. They're still going to butts. The only changes that are happening is maybe some of the mixed paper because there just isn't a market for mixed paper. But for the most part, it's been status quo. It's just we don't have that contract long term with them, so we're sort of on and they've been very good about allowing us to operate until we can kind of get some guidance from council as to how to move forward.
So what are those options moving forward? Republic presented a list of potential options for moving forward. What does that entail?
Yeah, so we presented a few. However, those options, obviously, they're not going anywhere yet. We don't have any instruction. And who knows what other ideas somebody might come up with, right? As we work with staff, we're always going to be putting our heads together and saying, what is best for San Angelo, right? We're your partner, and we want to make sure that we do what's best. But some of the options were, I'll tell you what we'll do. So let me give you the options that have been going on around the country. How's that? Because then it's fact. So around the country, people are doing one of several things. They're ending their programs altogether because they're just too expensive to subsidize, right? So some people are just ending it.
And so they're just
going back to picking up trash, right? And that's happening all over the country, not only with Republic but other waste companies, right? I mean, that's the easy fix. It's the least expensive fix, and it's the easiest fix. It's something that can be done almost immediately. Some other cities are limiting the material. So some cities are going to a cardboard-only pickup because cardboard's worth some money still to the recyclers.
There still is a market for cardboard.
There's a market for good, clean cardboard. Think about the huge conglomerates, shipping companies, and the shopping companies, and all those types. It's all cardboard.
Right, everything you get from Amazon.
Yeah. I mean, I know I have something at my door every time I go home, right? I mean, a lot of people do. And so you think about the recycle market's pretty heavy, and it's pretty hefty still. So some of them are doing, okay, look, we're going to keep curbside, but we're only going to do cardboard. But that's a huge diversion, right? That's a lot of cardboard. And then some are doing, a mixture of cardboard and tin or aluminum, things like that. So you're just seeing some tweaking. Some cities, a lot of cities, depending on their size and depending on their budgets, are saying, we don't want to change. We like the current system. Our citizens like the current system. What is it going to cost to keep this thing going? And whatever that cost is, some cities are just saying, well, we're going to keep it going. That's what they want. So those are only 3 or 4 options, right? There's a lot more going on, but those are the 3 most popular.
And So the city council, though, wants to gather some input. I think it's important that our viewers know that the city council said we're going to have a series of town hall meetings to gather public input so that the public can help the council decide which of the options that are on the table that they want to consider and to pass. But if the council, Joe, came to you and said, what is Republic's recommendation? Would y'all have any such recommendation for them at this point?
Sure. I mean, we would love to give some recommendations, and I think as we move forward, that's kind of what the whole process is going to be. But I don't think we need to see the end of recycling in San Angelo. I think the system needs to be tweaked. You could possibly do what other cities our size do and have drop-off stations, right, where you would have sort of a doghouse type facility where the folks who are really into recycling are going to, pack it up once a week or however often they need to go and go to that drop-off station and separate it. And we have already spoken to Butts about, hey, what if these options are always going to include Butts? So we wanted to make sure that this was something they could handle. And so here's why that kind of program would be successful, is if people are going out of their way to recycle, you're going to get good material, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's going to have a low contamination rate.
Absolutely. You're going to get good, clean material because you're going out of your way to do it, rather than having a curbside where you may have some folks that are just kind of using that container, as an extra trash container, or, putting things in there that shouldn't be in there just because, well, it's there, right? But if you're making it a point to load up your recyclables and bring them to a location, and it could be 4 or 5, it could be 6 locations around the city to make it very convenient, and then those would be picked up as they get full and brought over to Butts, and it just creates a really nice, clean atmosphere, and it makes it a lot easier for them to package and bail and have a commodity that they can sell.
So assuming a change in service, how might that impact the rates that people are currently paying for their garbage collection?
Yeah, so rate's not something that I can just come up with, right? So it would depend on that service. So we would, the term put the pencil to it, right? We would have to know, okay, look, guys, we would need direction. We would need to say, look, we want to do this, or we want to do this. What is the cost associated to both of these, or what is the savings of cost? Not everything has to go up, right? Depending on how we tweak the service, we're not saying that rates are going to go up. Nobody is talking about rate. We want to figure out what the best service is first.
And so that's going to be part of the process. The city council is going to meet with the public, get their input, perhaps ask Republic what your recommendations are, give you some guidance, and then those calculations and those negotiations with the city manager's office, for instance, will then continue, and then something will eventually be brought back to the city council.
Correct.
For consideration.
Absolutely.
I've heard some speculation that these changes in Chinese policy regarding the acceptance of American recyclables is related to our current disputes with that country regarding trade and tariffs. Does that really have anything to do with the current situation with recyclables?
Look, I'm not an expert. You and I aren't experts in foreign policy, but I would say that China has been talking to American recyclers for years about the contamination rates. So I just think that it's probably a mixture of all those things. I think that the current climate may be playing a little bit of a part in it, but these conversations are not new. China has had an issue with American recyclables for years. And so I think that it might be playing a small part in it, but the timing is off because these were going on long before any of these, the tariffs and things like that have been happening. These conversations have been ongoing.
So we've been talking with Joe Spano. Joe is the Municipal Services Manager for Republic Services, which again is our contracted provider for trash services. And as we mentioned before, the City Council has given clear direction today that they want some town hall forums, a series of these meetings, so that they can meet with the public, consider your input into what should be done moving forward with San Angelo's recycling program. And so please be on the lookout on our page, the local media, our TV channel, our website, because as soon as we get information about where and when those meetings will be, we'll be happy to pass those along to you.